So you're all good.
That's good. You start the recording. I call this meeting to order at 6:35. Next is the territorial acknowledgement. The Board of Directors acknowledges that the University of Waterloo is on the traditional territory of the neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee people. Our organization operates on the Haldeman Tract, land promised to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Next is our student story from Anshul. Not seeing him. If he so happens to join the meeting, we can maybe pause for a second, hear that story. But given that he's not here, I guess. Oh,
Hey,
Anshul,
I'm actually here, Rory.
oh, sorry about that.
I'm sorry. I just had a very busy December and I couldn't. I understand it's disappointing, but I could maybe try to do it next time. But I just couldn't find it. I'm so sorry.
No problem. We'll have you marked for next time then. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely do it next time. Just it's been very busy with co-ops.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to our agenda approval. So be it resolved that the board approve the meeting agenda as presented. Can I have a seconder for that? Katie? Are there any points of discussion with regards to the agenda? I see you have your hand up, Matthew. I'm not sure if that was for the seconding.
I was wondering if we are live right now or not, and if we should be.
So we are not currently live. Usually it's Mike who handles the live stream, but right now he's on vacation. So it's still being recorded.
Okay.
And I guess we can post it on the YouTube after. Yeah.
I just don't know how to do the live thing.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing anything. We'll go to the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. I think that takes it by consensus, but just be sure. Any opposed? Not seeing any. So next on the agenda, conflict of interest. Would anyone like to declare a conflict of interest at this time? Not seeing anything, so we can move on to our first item of business on the agenda, which is 2.1, discussion on federal advocacy organizations. I'm sort of going to pass this over to Katie to give a quick brief on sort of what we're thinking, and then we're also very curious on what you guys are all thinking. Right, Katie?
All right. So Rory, myself, as well as Matthew, had a discussion. I would say before the holidays on what we define as successful advocacy and what does essentially our federal advocacy look like and what do we consider federal advocacy wins. One of the main reasons why this was brought up is because, as we discussed in my last weekly report, there was a lot of, I guess you could say, hesitancy when it came to staying with UCLU for the foreseeable future. So I propose that we look at joining CAPSA, which is the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. For instance, if we do join CAPSA, we can join through a letter of intent, and if it's accepted, then we can become observers for the next 2 years and try out their membership and see what successful advocacy really looks like with another organization. But that kind of leads us back to the main points of really looking at what we consider to be successful federal advocacy, because we also had other options such as developing our own institutional knowledge or going into federal advocacy really on our own. If we join CASA, there is this, I guess you could say, point of if we do become observers, then we should go in with the intent of also understanding what that organization is and if that is something we want to lead up to and maybe, let's say, eventually pay fees for. But overall, there are some guiding questions, and Matthew also helped prepare this document, so maybe I'll pass it over to you, Matthew, if you want to help expand on some of the points, but there are guiding questions below. And then Matthew, assistance, thoughts?
Absolutely. So I wrote a little bit here so that we can have a little bit of an idea if we were to explore joining CASP with observer status or whatever other option we go with. that we have a sense of what are the outcomes that we're looking for here. And the idea of that would be at the end of the 2 years, you make the decision, do you want to start paying fees for this organization and whatever, gets your members, or do you not? And without asking these kind of questions and being able to sort of monitor some of those things as you're going along to see, okay, is this successful in the ways we wanted it to be successful? Is this worth it for our student fees? Having an idea of what your minimum bar is and what your goals are makes it a lot easier to make those assessments, those decisions down the road. And really, so what we're talking about here is doing a little bit of thinking for the board of 2 years from now to give them some support. So the idea that some of this here is, if anyone around the table has some thoughts now, there's some guiding questions to guide a little bit of this conversation. But really, I'm just looking for thoughts and direction or ideas from you, the leaders and the representatives of the students here, what meaningful and effective federal advocacy looks like, so that the governance department can go away and formalize that a little bit and work with others to maybe develop something a little bit more formalized for us to bring forward whenever we do bring forward something like Katie's proposal that was going cast for those 2 years.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess I'll open it up to the floor if anyone has anything that they'd like to bring up. Obviously, we hope this is a very free-flowing conversation. So, yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
I've got some questions from earlier that aren't on the paper. Just how much does it cost to join as an observer?
So the cost of observership is free for the 2 years that you are an observer. And then the fees after that point are $297 per student, which is the highest level in CASA. Yes, Katie.
To add on to that, we would also have to pay for like travel expenses. And I do think maybe, if I'm right, observer status might cost around 100, 200.
It might be around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if
Students?
No.
Overall.
Like over the course of 2 years. For example, that will probably cover like communications or just smaller things such as invites.
And then what's the 297?
So that's if we decide after the 2-year observer, if we want to stay with CASA full time, that is how much we would have to pay per member. So that's, 30,000 odd students times $2.97. So like
$2.97.
not 200. No.
I knew.
Sorry.
I'm doing the mental math. Red flags are going off. I've struggled with math before. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Travel, right, for the first.
So yeah, there would be travel to the events and things like that.
And is that open to the students as members?
Travel as in like the executives.
Right.
So like, it's very similar to what we have for WUSA when we go to Lobby Week in Queens, where we're meeting with politicians. It'd be very similar to CASA, where they would go to Ottawa and meet with politicians there.
Wonderful.
I guess, wait, so, yeah, so.
Mhm.
On that note about fees, I guess you could say, I recommended CASA originally because I thought successful advocacy, at least federally, would really look like meeting with a bunch of MPs. And that was, at the time, from what I understood, something CASA excelled at. And that was originally the only vision I saw when joining the organization. But when we go into the depths of these types of questions, it's really more to the point of what is successful advocacy for us. For instance, if we want to say successful advocacy is, let's say, doing a bunch of different meetings with MPs and we share pre-budget submissions and we share our goals and we bolster those relationships, maybe CASA is the right way to go. But it doesn't always have to be that way. We have strong relationships within Waterloo and within the KWCG region as well. And if we do join as observers, we can also leave at any time. But I also had a conversation with their previous executive director where it is the advice that they also gave me, or the discussion that we had, was if we do decide to become members or like observers, we, I guess we'd say, shouldn't really waste anyone's time. Like, shouldn't really waste the organization's time if we're just going to like stay for the 2 years and leave. Originally, my goal was like maybe we see the 2 years and then either leave or join, depending on the successes that we foresaw within the organization. But the main point of this is really, what do you as board members see to be the best successes for federal advocacy for our students? Because right now our students also don't know that much about what we do federally.
Or at all.
I mean, or at all, yeah.
Sometimes.
Same goes with like some provincial work too.
Maybe just some background too, for some people who don't know, we used to be a part of CASA, probably back, when was that, 20
Years ago.
years ago, long time ago, with all the other Ontario big universities, like McMaster and UT and stuff like that. And then sometime back in history, all of the Ontario schools went to CASA and said, hey, we're paying too much fees relative to our size. And so they essentially all left the organization and they founded UCRU. And UCRU has been hobbling along for however many years now. And, you know, some of these other big institutions have started to do their own observer status in CASA. U of T and McMaster are the two big ones that I can think of.
Western
Who's
as well.
Western as well. I know U of T's observer status ends sometimes this year. So they'll be facing that decision themselves, whether they want to stay in the organization and pay those fees, or if they are going to go off and do their own thing. And so it might be interesting to see what they do, just as a place of comparison.
That was another question, was why haven't we been in CASA? It's been around since 1995, but we have. And that was the only reason we left, was because of fees.
It's also sort of the voting structure.
Yeah.
We
Um,
founded it.
We founded it.
um,
That's okay.
We also funded WUSA.
Yeah.
So we're going full circle?
High participation for us, yes.
So the big thing is that
No.
it's not just universities who can join CASA, it's other post-secondary institutions like colleges and stuff like that. And the thing is that each institution only gets one vote, no matter their size. And so often what happens is, you know, the smaller schools can sometimes outvote the bigger schools, and sort of the way some people argue happens, just because each only gets one vote. It's not proportional to the amount of students they have.
We don't get votes as observers, guys.
No, you kind of just, you don't necessarily participate, but you're there to observe. I was like, I don't know other way. I think,
If there's not a lot of
yeah,
something I might add, just for a little bit of the, you know, if it's a useful thought here, is I would suggest for any amount of this conversation that's to be had, keeping it mostly out of the realm of evaluating CAS at this stage, because the conversation is around setting something like outcomes that you want to see, is less about the specific, you know, proposal of the table. You know, the proposal to like CAS certainly isn't before the board today, although if, you know, things goes bad, I think that that's the intention down the road. And this is more around at a high level, what outcomes do we want to see? And because those can mean a lot of very different things. For some schools and for some individuals, successful federal advocacy might just be, you know, having meetings with politicians, being able to post it on your socials and talk to students about how we are having these conversations. For other schools and for other people, they might say, I want to be able to see demonstratable impacts on policy. And that's something that I know, like WUSA, for example, does a lot of, and that's something we like to talk about WUSA. And we might be less big fans of WUSA if that wasn't something that we saw, because that's one of the outcomes that we care quite a bit about when it comes to WUSA. Some of the other sort of guiding questions I wrote here are around what do we want our involvement to be or influence to have, because that's another thing, is that CASA, for as successful as it may be, one piece of the conversation might be, is the amount of success CASA is going to have change after WUSA joins it? Are we going to have an impact on the amount of success they are going to have, or are they going to have the same amount of success before and after? And in that kind of case, you might say, well, it's important to be a part of it, and we fund it, we've been able to talk to our students about how we're engaged on that. Or you might have the perspective that, you know, if we're not going to have a huge marginal impact, then why would we put the effort there that's going to happen otherwise under somebody else's name? And those are all kind of questions that you might want to consider when you're evaluating at a high level, you know, what are we willing to have federal advocacy look like? You know, what prices are we willing to pay? And eventually, you know, what do we think of a specific proposal for example, like joining CASA.
Right, Jeff?
I was going through the, I guess Katie also put it in chat again, but the report that Katie presented a few meetings.
If you could start over, we can't quite hear it. I think we're trying to get the volume up.
Yeah.
I would also just suggest yelling. But
You know what? I'm gonna switch to my PC because I have a microphone there. I'll yield my time and I'll be right back.
Okay. Jeff will be back.
oh,
Okay.
He said you
have No, I'm just gonna reload his laptop.
We missed our meeting.
Mhm.
Remember the at-large
Oh.
student?
Oh, wait, I didn't know that you scheduled it.
Anyway.
Something else.
Oh,
Hello.
Much better there.
All right. Yeah, I do not have a camera on my PC, but I was going through the report that Katie posted in chat that I think she presented to us back in October, and one of the I guess sort of in answering one of Matthew's guiding questions, I suppose I was looking at the tangible wins section for CASA, and I guess the only thing sort of the point listed there was a meeting with PM Trudeau, but the final part sort of says uncertainty of what came of those 40 minutes. So I guess I've wondered what CASA has, how CASA has positively impacted its members over the past years. Obviously, we can't just maybe we can't just look at outcomes because, you know, as Matthew said, those relationships and FaceTime can help. But when we're paying a decent amount of money, or potentially thinking about paying a decent amount of money every year, I guess we have to think about what benefits students are going to get. Just looking at the CASA wins page right now, they haven't posted anything in 2023 at all. All of the things that I do see seem to be around the pandemic, which is great. I guess maybe observer status could help us see what it is that CASA is able to achieve with the money and time put into it.
Go ahead, Alex.
I'm going off of, also, thank you, Matthew, for the wins page as well. I'm just glancing at it, not so much the top 10, so much more the students applauding. Students were applauding and we're excited to see stuff. Is CASA more advocacy or lobbying? Because those are two different things in my mind.
So I guess you could say the reason why I also proposed CASA in the first place is because similar to WUSA in a sense, it does its own lobbying, which expands the number of MPs we can meet. They also do their own research. So the link that I posted in the chat is a link to their main page or like main web page, which also shows their more recent pre-budget submissions for 2024, as well as other like research findings, which I think brings us back to the main point of this discussion. If you like move away from CASA a little bit, is that successful federal advocacy might look like WUSA doing our own reception, inviting MPs that we know or MPs that we don't really have a relationship with, and spending our money to fund something like that. It might be, let's say, be doing more research that can impact more federal changes on that kind of level through data collection and insights. Maybe it's campaigning, something like that, which is why it's really important that we kind of like, I guess you could say as the board, set those outcomes. And I know the discussion really kind of focuses on my proposal to join CASA. I guess you could say one of the reasons why I find that organization more desirable is because since it's such a large organization, it also has lots of resources that we can pull from, which might also alleviate, let's say, our staff doing more stuff that we've been doing on UCUR. I think back to the main discussion, does anyone have any other thoughts on the guiding questions that Matthew really wonderfully summed up for us, which is what does successful federal advocacy look like? What are things that we might want to see that demonstrates impact on policy, interactions with politicians, experiences for student leaders, and so forth. And if not, then perhaps we can wrap up discussion soon.
Sounds good. So I think maybe I'll just throw myself out there when I think of, what does advocacy, look like, and what is the goal of, our advocacy here at WUSA. I do sort of think of the WUSA model of, what are the direct, lines of wins that you can draw from the advocacy. I think a clear example of that of WUSA is with the freeze in tuition. And I think, not only CASA, but any organization that we work with on the federal level, it might be harder to draw those direct, lines, just, for various reasons. One of them being that federal advocacy is less student related than provincial advocacy is, just due to the fact that the way the thing is all broken down, the provincial government has more direct control over institutions like the University of Waterloo, whereas other federal bodies don't have as direct lines of control. But I'm curious to see, how other people are feeling. Like, is that something that we need to have in federal advocacy? Are those direct wins, or is the research that we're doing and publishing, like, is that a win? Like, how is everyone feeling? I think that was the sort of
discussion that we're trying to go for.
Go ahead, Jeff. We can't hear you, Jeff, if you're speaking.
Shoot. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I'd have to agree with you, Rory. I guess if we were throwing around things we might want to see as criteria for, transitioning from observers to full members, is like, what sort of actual benefit can we deliver for students? Probably going to be hard to do, as you say, but if there is no sort of benefit there for Waterloo students, then that's, I guess, the bottom line. I guess sort of another good point that was brought up earlier is, I think another criteria we should be looking at is what kind of positive impact not just CASA had, but Waterloo had at CASA, because we're not a part of CASA right now. They're doing some things. How much of an impact for roughly 100K a year, 120K a year was it? Are we bringing to the table there? Popcorn it off to someone else.
Go ahead, Brian.
Just potentially some food for thought, just from past experience, as well as federal advocacy is really hard. When you look at wins and you're looking at a part of your assessment, I would encourage you folks to remind yourselves that it really depends on which governments are in, what their priorities are, even as an elected party, also what their opposition's priorities are, because the challenge that I think historically we've seen with federal advocacy is we will see wins coming 4 or 5 years later after it was initially brought to the federal table, whether that was a member of parliament or a committee or just started speaking about an issue. And one thing to keep in mind is within that advocacy is also the consistency of that advocacy, of being able to make sure that those pieces and what those topics are and priorities are for post-secondary institutions or our students at Waterloo, is of making sure that those remain top of mind, but also being committed that it might take a long time. So even during this assessment and when you're thinking about what good federal advocacy looks like, definitely think about the wins, but also think about the processes. Think about how you can get involved, because the wins alone, you're probably not going to see something from when you're an observer within the next year that's just automatically going to be a win. Normally it takes a little bit longer, just the federal government works quite slow. But I just wanted to put that point together, because I don't want anybody to during this evaluation process to be looking at it and saying, well, what is UCRU 1 or what is CASA 1 or what are these other lobby organizations happened in the last year, because it's a much larger time horizon when it comes to that federal advocacy component.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free to as well. But if not, I think, yeah, that's a really great point as well. I guess for the purposes of really relatively constrained time frame, 1 to 2 years, I guess we could focus more on sort of black boxing the actual federal government part of it and seeing what CASA is bringing to that, like what CASA is outputting, and how satisfied we are with that sort of the sort of I don't know, positions or reports, or even just I guess towards what Brian said, the process inputs to the government, because we won't see those outputs for a while.
Alex, your hand was up briefly. Do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, I think from a federal advocacy point of view, I think joining something like this and taking the observer status as time to look into it, peer into the machine, would be helpful in a sense that although Waterloo students, just like any other group of university students, have their own issues to deal with, we're all federally, like we all suffer from high tuition, we all have high rents. Like these are all things that are worth advocating at the federal level.
Tuition's more of a provincial thing, but yes, I agree. Tuition's more of a provincial thing, but I agree with the rent thing. Okay. Go ahead, Chevin.
This is just a quick question, but I was just wondering if like a membership in CASA has any like conflicts of interest with WUSA's other commitments or partnerships, like keeping our governance model in mind. Does it change our model or enhance it in any way?
I would say to that, we're not really in conflict with any of the other groups that we're with. For example, WUSA is just provincial matters. So if we join CASA, we wouldn't necessarily be interfering with our work at WUSA. I forgot if CASA has a provincial wing. I don't.
The only thing might be the fact that Katie is currently the chair of UCRU. And so there might be some questions or concerns around that.
Isn't that funny? But essentially, right now, it's just, I would say it's kind of weird for me to approach CASA as the chair of another organization. But then again, UCRU is also a small working group, and there's nothing necessarily within the operating policies or bylaws that prevents any member of UCRU to like go to another organization as well. So if it could enhance our current governance model, I would just say it would definitely alleviate a lot of the work hours that I've been putting into federal advocacy, as well as our staff have been. For example, David has been supporting me. David's one of our staff members. I forgot David's official title.
Stakeholder Relations Officer.
Stakeholders Relations Officer. And he helps me a lot with UCRU, especially when it comes to organizing meetings, supports for pre-budget submissions, emailing NPs and whatnot. And his role is way beyond that too. I guess you could say right now we have lots of hours put into UCRU, and we're not necessarily seeing the benefit out of it. So I would say we're not necessarily losing anything if we leave UCRU, and we're not necessarily sure yet. Hopefully we would have found out more through this discussion if we would have gained more through CASA, or if we just decided to enhance our governance model in other ways by, let's say, setting other outcomes that we could focus on enhancing, either during our observer status at CASA or without that. That makes sense.
Hope that answered your question. Go ahead, Matthew.
Just to keep going with that, I think the observer status is like a super good option, just considering how cheap it will be for the next 2 years compared to like UCRU, for example. But I also wanted to highlight, just like thinking about it, what we do in Waterloo will usually give students the most like noticeable, seeable, tangible impact, like what we do in the region first and then the province next. Sorry, I'm a bit sick. And then federally, students might not see any outcome, and we might be spending $120,000 that could go to like an awesome event, for example, that all of our students will notice once per year. But at the same time, of course, if we could like push federally for like if a $1,000 federal grant was approved, then it seems 100% worth our investment. But I think at least given that we have 2 years to see if there's anything getting done, like if we can talk to MPs, for example, as a part of it, and see if any actual laws or changes could be made, that would be super important.
Sounds good. Is good information you're getting here, Matthew, or is there any more of the 5 questions you want more elaboration on?
Definitely like forward, and good to hear everybody's thoughts and everything. And
Okay, sounds good then. I think if anyone has anything else, we'll move on to our next items.
I just randomly put in
I
the chat.
guess.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, just give me. I guess I'm just throwing. I've only heard, I guess, two rough criteria. I guess, which was the outcome of this discussion we were trying to do. I'll just summarize what I heard in chat, and maybe people can see if there's anything missing or have any thoughts on that we might want to add for the record. And hopefully these will be in the minutes for anyone following along.
I think, unless anyone has anything to say about those. Noted.
I already had. Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Just one more quick point. I can see that there isn't, obviously, like the research universities are part of UCRU. That's what it was meant for originally, right? But if we do move to CASA and other similar schools do follow, we might have a much greater impact than CASA currently has. So that's something to think about looking forward a few years down the road for sure.
Okay. So just moving on to the next items then. So under general reports, start with my report. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns with regards to my report? Yeah, I do have some updates about the Ombuds office because I sit on that hiring committee. I think you do this. Maybe I'll give it in confidential.
Just because it's a process that's still going on, that's all. Right.
Oh, no. Be all over Reddit tomorrow. Not seeing any questions, I guess. Not very long board report. Go on to Katie. If you have any questions, comments, concerns for Katie's report, or if she has any updates to give.
I guess quick update then. We've completed all of the WUSA consultations, so our research team has done an incredible job outlining all of the work for the new papers. Soon we'll also, or at least I will put out another opportunity for other directors or our membership to get involved for the spring GA. So you can look forward to seeing that on the jobs and opportunities page soon, hopefully by or near the end of the month. Any questions for me for federal stuff, municipal stuff, or committee stuff? Enough that good stuff. Okay.
Not seeing any. Okay. Move on to then to Dan's report. Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any. On to director's report. Does anyone have any questions for any of the other directors? Not seeing anything. We will move then to item 4.
Really
Go
quick.
ahead, Jeff.
Do either of the I'm not sure if Jay is here or Tham. What's the sorry, what's going on with the CEE Waterloo Works UI revamp? When is that supposed to come out?
I don't think we were, let me know if I'm too quiet. My microphone's weird. I don't think we were given a deadline for that. I think in the September co-op council, they demonstrated it for us, or like the prototype, quote unquote, they have so far, and asked for feedback, but nothing on there's been no updates since then. So if you'd like to know more, then we have our bi-weekly meeting next week, and I can ask about it.
Sounds good. Hope that answered your question, Jeff. Anyone else have any questions? Not seeing anything, so then I will motion that we move to confidential session. Can I have a seconder for that? Katie? Yeah, when the recording is paused.
Keep recording, though, it's just not live stream right now.
Historically, I don't know.
We still record our confidential sessions.
I think Mike usually pauses the recording. And then, all your heads like turned up on
Yes. That brings that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm new to this part of the job.